The fluorescent lights of the morgue hummed, a low, constant drone that had become the soundtrack to my life. I was Evelyn Reed, and for the last decade, this chill, sterile room had been as much a home as anywhere else. Sometimes more. Today, though, it felt different, a bit off, like the air itself was holding its breath. I leaned over the stainless steel table, the latest occupant, a farmer who'd apparently just stopped. No obvious cause of death. The paperwork said cardiac arrest, a catch-all when the heart simply gave out. But my gut, the one that usually knew better, was making little noises. My gloved fingers traced a line on the man's scalp. He was old, maybe in his 70s. What I saw wasn't textbook. There was this small swelling just behind the ear, a purplish-blue patch, barely an inch across, sitting there like a bruise. Not quite a bruise, though. It had a strange kind of definition to it, almost like a raised network under the skin. I adjusted the exam lamp, the cold light slicing through the dimness of the room, shining down on the spot. It glows, almost, I mumbled to myself, my voice flat against the hum. I touched it gently, the latex crinkling. And it feels a little warm. My brow furrowed. That made no sense. Bodies in the morgue were kept cold, preserved. Something was wrong with the cooling system tonight, I guessed. Maybe I hadn't paid enough attention to the ambient temperature. It was late. I was tired. I pulled my glove up higher on my wrist, gave my head a little shake. Just a blip, my mind playing tricks. Later that evening, the tiredness still clung to me like a damp sheet. Coming home was supposed to be the antidote to the day's strange findings, a return to the known. Sarah, my daughter, was usually a whirlwind of questions and stories about her day. But tonight, she was quiet, very quiet. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board the only sound in the kitchen. "Sarah, want to help me out here?" I asked, not looking up, smiling vaguely towards her. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. She just shifted her shoulders slightly, didn't say a word. Her eyes were fixed on the tangle of oak leaves outside, but they didn't seem to be focusing on anything in particular, just looking. She'd had a mild flu last week, a nasty little bug that had swept through her school. Everyone got it, practically. I went to her, placed the back of my hand against her forehead. No fever. Her skin felt normal, but her eyes, the usual sparkle, the mischievous glint I loved, it was just gone. Replaced by something that looked like intent, but felt like nothing. "It's the flu," I told myself, feeling a twist in my stomach. Kids get a bit down when they're recovering from the flu. It makes them withdrawn. But not like this. Not my Sarah. I sighed, pulling the blinds shut against the fading light. The feeling of unease, though, it stuck to me, a persistent little burr under my skin. The next day, David, one of my closest colleagues, a solid guy who loved old detective novels and bad coffee, also seemed different. He'd been off with that same flu bug last week. He came back to work with a new kind of energy, almost a jittery alertness around his eyes. We were in the specimen room, moving some new samples. A heavy box of formaldehyde-preserved tissue slipped from the top of a shelf. It was a bulky thing, probably 40 pounds, meant for 2 people. "Let me help," I said, starting to reach for it. But David was already there, bent over, and in one fluid motion, he snatched it up with a single hand. He made it look like it was a feather, not even a grunt. "Nah, I got it," he said, his voice a little deeper than usual, a strange resonant quality to it. Then, just as he was setting the box down, neatly, perfectly, I managed to fumble and drop my pen. It hit the linoleum floor with a sharp, small tack. David flinched. Not just a normal flinch, though. His whole body jumped, stiff and twitchy. And then it happened. A soft, dry click echoed from deep within his throat, a sound I'd heard before, but never associated with a human. His eyes, quick and darting, snapped to mine. There was a coldness there, a hard, assessing look, something I'd never seen in David's usually kind, tired eyes. "You okay, David?" I asked, my voice dropping, trying to sound casual, but my breath felt tight in my chest. He gave a quick, stiff smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "Just a bit jumpy, I guess. All these unusual cases, you know?" He laughed, a short, humorless puff of air. "Makes you sensitive, eh?" His gaze lingered on me for a second longer than was comfortable. I felt it, the prickling sensation on my neck. He wasn't just talking, he was observing, draping his strange behavior in a flimsy explanation. I swallowed, forcing down a sudden dryness in my throat. That night, after putting a too-quiet Sarah to bed, I couldn't shake the chill I'd felt from David, or the memory of that purplish-blue patch on the farmer's brain. My own brain was racing. I dragged my laptop into the living room, surrounded by piles of journals and old reports. The blue light from the screen painted my face in stark shadows. I started digging, not just the recent cases, but old files. Cases I'd dismissed as natural causes or unknown etiology. Cases where something just didn't quite add up, but I'd filed them away, assuming some oversight on my part, or just the inherent messiness of biological reality. I scrolled through lines of pathology reports, images of brain scans, tissue samples. Something snagged my attention, a faint detail in a report from a few weeks prior. I'd skimmed it then. Neural network reconstruction. That phrase, it meant nothing to me at the time. A complex term, probably just some over-enthusiastic jargon from a lab tech. But now I saw it. The same subtle spiderweb-like patterns on cellular micrographs. The same descriptions of unusual, organized growth within the neural tissue. It wasn't just on the farmer. It wasn't just in the cases deemed strange. It was everywhere. It had been there, lurking in the innocuous, normal deaths. I found a file for an old woman who was reported to have died peacefully in her sleep, heart failure. A quick scan of her brain tissue from the autopsy report, an almost microscopic detail. And there it was. Those faint, purplish-blue lines, a delicate, almost beautiful latticework, mirroring exactly what I'd seen on the farmer. But fainter, less developed. It had been there, all along, right under my nose. I had missed it. No, worse, I had explained it away with comfortable, logical explanations that were now crumbling around me. My assumptions about the natural order of things, about logic itself, they were all being swept away. My hands were shaking. I clicked, my finger hovering over another old file, one I'd sworn was just a simple garden-variety stroke case. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I felt utterly, completely isolated, a lone voice whispering into a hurricane. What the hell was going on? My mind, trained for objective fact, was starting to unravel. I needed to call someone outside of this small town, someone with a wider view, with more resources. I thought of Anne, an old friend from med school, now at the CDC. She'd listen, she'd understand, or at least try. I grabbed my phone, her number already on speed dial, fingers clumsy. It rang. Sarah, who'd been curled on the sofa with a blanket, watching a muted cartoon, slowly stood up. "I'm going to bed, Mom," she mumbled, her voice muffled by the blanket. "Okay, sweetie. Good night," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady, my ear still pressed to the phone. Anne picked up. Sarah shuffled up the stairs, her small bare feet making soft thuds on the old wooden steps. And then I heard it. A sound, low and rough, almost a whisper of friction, like dry insects rubbing together. A soft, guttural chittering. It came from Sarah, her small body as she disappeared around the corner of the landing. It was so faint, almost swallowed by the faint ringing on the phone line and the silence of the house. But it was there. It was there for a fraction of a second. Then it was gone. I froze, heart hammering. "Evelyn," Anne's voice, concerned, came through the receiver. "You there? What was that? And your voice, it just changed." No, just the house, Anne," I lied, my voice a little too high, a nervous tremor I couldn't quite hide. "What's up? I need to ask you something really strange." I tried to sound normal, rational, but the chittering wasn't my imagination. It wasn't the old house. It had come from my daughter, my Sarah, and she was hiding something terrible. I sat there in the dark living room, the laptop still glowing on my lap, after Sarah had finally, blessedly fallen asleep. The unsettling certainty of what I'd just heard, coupled with the files I'd just reviewed, was a heavy cloak wrapped around me. I felt cold, deep down, bone cold. I needed something familiar, something that made sense. I opened an old photo album on my laptop, pictures of Sarah. Sarah as a baby, chubby-cheeked and gurgling. Sarah at kindergarten, missing a front tooth, a bright, unburdened smile. Sarah on her first bicycle, wobbling with determined joy. I scrolled through them, searching for solace in those sweet, normal memories. My fingers felt numb. Then I paused. A picture. Sarah, maybe 5 years old, on a swing set at the town park. Her face a blur of joyful motion, hair flying. And in the background, under the ancient oak tree at the edge of the park, a shape. Tall, too tall for a person, maybe. Dark, blending into the shadows of the tree, almost like a part of it, but not. It was just a dark smudge, ambiguous. A trick of shadow, maybe. It could be anything. A forgotten statue, an odd branch. I never noticed that," I whispered, my voice barely audible in the quiet room. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. I zoomed in. And as the image expanded, the details sharpened. The shape was not a tree branch. It was humanoid, a dark, lean figure, not distinctly outlined, more like a hole in the light, absorbing it. Just as I clicked to zoom in further, the screen flickered. A sudden jarring strobe of light. And in that instantaneous flash, that single split second of distorted light, the figure in the photo seemed to move. Its head turned, and 2 points of absolute, consuming darkness, like empty wells, seemed to bore directly into me, right through the screen of my laptop, staring directly at me. Then, just as quickly, the flicker was gone. The image shifted back, the figure once again standing still, unmoving, merely a dark smudge under the tree. The moment had passed. It was less than a second. My breath caught in my throat. I recoiled, jerking backwards, dragging the laptop with me until the cord pulled taut. My heart was a frantic drum solo against my ribs. Did I just imagine that?
Fatigue? Stress? My mind playing tricks, overlaying my growing fear onto an innocent photograph? I stared at the spot in the tree. It was empty now. The dark shape was gone from where I'd seen it. Not blurred, just not there anymore. But in my mind, the image of those two dark, bottomless eyes, they were perfectly clear, etched onto my retina. And then, from somewhere outside the window, a soft click. A dry, echoing sound, faint but unmistakable. A confirmation. That shadow, it had been there all along, just waiting. I slapped the laptop shut, the sudden darkness a temporary relief from the flickering horror. I stood up, feeling a profound coldness, the kind that came from the inside out. I shuffled to Sarah's door, pushed it open a fraction. She was sleeping soundly, a faint glow from her nightlight painting her room in soft oranges. "I'm so sorry, my love," I whispered, a tear tracing a cold path down my cheek. And then, from just outside the living room window, a sound that made my entire body stiffen. A distinct, dry, hollow click. This time it was sharp, closer, much closer. As if something was right there, right behind the glass. I spun around, my breath catching. The living room was dark. The garden outside was dark, silent, still. Nothing there. Just the quiet. But I felt it, a bone-deep chill, like someone had stood directly behind me, breathing down my neck, just moments ago. And on the window pane, almost perfectly centered, a faint, damp smear. A blurry, almost translucent mark, like a giant, distorted fingerprint, slowly, imperceptibly fading into the night. It wasn't just out there. It had reached. It had touched my window. And I could still smell it. A faint, earthy odor of damp soil mixed with something else. Something strange, sweet and sickly. A lingering, wrong kind of scent that made my stomach churn. The danger. It wasn't just a general threat. Not anymore. Not anymore. It had found me. It was at my door. The next morning, the exhaustion was like a lead cloak. After putting Sarah to bed, after Anne's call that had gone nowhere, just more vague reassurances about the flu epidemic and promises to look into it, I had stayed up. My laptop was still open, the screen a cold blue rectangle. The farmer, David, Sarah's faint, dry chittering. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be.
I made myself a mug of coffee, black, scalding, and went to the living room, collapsing onto the sofa closest to the TV. Anything to distract me, to try and convince myself that the world outside was still making some kind of sense. I turned on the local news channel. Just background noise, maybe. The anchor, a cheerful woman named Brenda, was talking about the widespread flu. Her voice was overly calm, almost soothing. Local authorities urge residents not to panic, she said, her smile plastered on. Remember to wash your hands, cover your coughs, and stay home if you feel unwell. It was boilerplate, the kind of news meant to calm, to bore. But it wasn't boring me. My stomach was doing flips. Then it happened. Just for a fraction of a second, the screen flickered. Brenda's face distorted, her features elongating, pulling apart like melting wax, morphing into a grotesque mask of lines and stretched skin. It was terrifying, impossible. My breath hitched. Then, just as quickly, she was back, her smile perfectly intact, her eyes gleaming. I blinked hard. Was I seeing things? My mind playing tricks again? I rubbed my eyes. No, it was too vivid, too specific. A moment later, they cut to a field report. A reporter stood outside the local hospital talking about a designated isolation zone. The footage was shaky, showing paramedics rushing a gurney into the building. And then it played again, the exact same clip, frame for frame, again. But the audio was just a bit louder, with a low, almost subliminal hum beneath the reporter's voice, a deep, unsettling buzz. I gripped the remote, my knuckles white. This wasn't a glitch, not really. It felt more like interference, a deliberate echo. It was like someone was trying to tell us something, but the message was being garbled, twisted, controlled. I saw faint patterns of broken static, almost like strange geometric shapes briefly appearing on the black screen where the news usually ran. It bothered me, deeply. "Mom, what are you watching?" Sarah's voice, small and sleepy, drifted from the doorway. She was standing there, rubbing her eyes with a worn teddy bear tucked under her arm. "Nothing, sweetie," I said, maybe a little too quickly. I switched off the TV. The sudden silence in the room felt heavy, accusatory. "Just old news. Come here." I patted the seat beside me, forcing a smile onto my face. She walked over, slow, like her joints were stiff. Her eyes seemed to scan the room before settling on me. The light wasn't quite catching them right. Still that slightly vacant stare. Not quite my Sarah. Not completely. "We need to go for a drive, sweetie," I said, trying to make it sound like an adventure. A long one. Maybe get out of town. Just for a few days. Clear our heads. Get away from whatever this was. A change of scenery. A different hospital, maybe. My mind was scrambling, trying to find concrete, scientific explanations, but they were all falling short. So we packed. Just a small bag. It was still early, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The town was quiet, too quiet. Not even the usual chirping of birds. It was unsettling. We got into my clunky old sedan. Sarah buckled herself into the back seat, strangely compliant. I drove slowly at first, past houses still dark, past empty streets. The air hung thick with a weird stillness, like the whole town was holding its breath. Then I saw him, Mr. Miller, my neighbor, the one who always fussed over his prize-winning roses in the summer. He was standing on the curb, right in front of his house, just standing there, staring out across his lawn. His skin looked off, too pale, almost translucent, and his arms hung at his sides, stiff. My foot hesitated over the accelerator. Was he sick? I thought about rolling down the window, asking if he needed help, but something instinctively told me not to. As my car glided past, creeping along the empty street, Mr. Miller slowly, agonizingly slowly, turned his head. His eyes, fixed on ours, were wide open, a little too wide. And then a smile stretched his lips. It was too broad, too bright. It didn't reach his eyes at all. It looked painted on, like something from a doll. And then I heard it, a soft, dry click. It came from him, from his throat, maybe. It wasn't loud, but in the oppressive silence, it felt like a tiny hammer striking bone. A very precise sound. It lingered in the air, tickling the back of my ears. even after my car had passed.